Gasping for air, my eyes snapped open to the glaring numbers on my digital clock. 7 a.m., May 12th, 2 days before the senior banquet. 2 days before, 72 students ended up hospitalized, and my reputation was utterly destroyed. This time, they were on their own. My hands shook violently as I gripped the edges of my vanity desk. The wood beneath my palms was solid, cool, and undeniably real. My breathing was ragged, catching in my throat as my brain tried to process the impossible. Minutes ago, or what felt like minutes ago, I was sitting in a sterile, fluorescent-lit courtroom. I could still hear the echoing, agonizing testimonies of furious parents. I could still feel the crushing weight of the judge's gaze. In that life, I had been the ultimate scapegoat, the girl who tried to skim off the top of the student council budget by hiring a black market caterer, endangering dozens of lives. Let me rewind. In my previous timeline, our senior class trip to the Silver Pines Resort was supposed to be the cinematic highlight of our high school experience. I was the head of the food committee, a role I took incredibly seriously. I had originally booked a highly rated, perfectly safe restaurant to cater our farewell banquet. But a week before the trip, our faculty advisor, Mr. Harrison, unceremoniously slashed my budget. Why? Because Brittany Hastings, the class president, resident mean girl, and daughter of a major school board donor, demanded a massive fireworks display for her grand finale. Forced to find a drastically cheaper catering option with only days to spare, I scoured the bottom of the barrel and found Moretti & Sons Catering. Even then, I knew something was wrong. I looked up their public health records and found a recent D-grade inspection citing severe refrigeration violations. I panicked. I took the printed reports directly to Mr. Harrison and Brittany, begging them to reconsider the budget. I told them it wasn't safe to feed 80 people discounted meat from a failing kitchen. Brittany literally laughed in my face. I remember the exact curl of her lip. Stop being a paranoid buzzkill, Jessica. Food is food. The fireworks are non-negotiable. Book it, or I'll have you removed from the council for incompetence. Mr. Harrison, eager to please the Hastings family, nodded along. Just get it done, Jessica, he sighed, not even looking up from his coffee. So, terrified of losing my extracurricular standing right before college admissions, I booked it. The result was a waking nightmare. Severe, violent salmonella and E. coli poisoning swept through the senior class. It hit during the overnight stay. The screams, the moans of agony, the sheer panic as ambulances with flashing red lights lined up outside the serene lakeside resort. Kids were hooked up to IVs on the grass, violently ill. I was one of them, curled into a fetal position, my insides feeling like they were being shredded by broken glass. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the aftermath. When the health department traced the biological disaster back to the lukewarm, undercooked chicken parmigiana, Brittany and Mr. Harrison didn't hesitate. They threw me directly to the wolves. They claimed I went rogue. Brittany tearfully told the principal that she had explicitly told me to book a high-end vendor, and that I must have forged the cheap invoice to pocket the difference. My supposed best friend, Samantha Davis, delivered the final blow. Wanting to stay in Brittany's elite social circle, Sam lied to the school board, claiming she saw me counting stacks of cash in the locker room. I was expelled just weeks before graduation. My college acceptances vanished into thin air. My parents went nearly bankrupt fighting the civil lawsuits from other families. My life was over before it even began. Now, staring at the glowing screen of my phone, the date stared back at me, mocking me. 2018. The banquet was exactly 48 hours away. I looked down at the physical, printed invoice sitting innocently on my desk. Moretti & Sons Catering. $1,200 for 80 hot meals. A bitter, cold laugh escaped my throat, echoing strangely in the quiet of my bedroom. The universe had actually hit the rewind button. The agonizing stomach cramps, the vicious social execution, The sheer, crushing injustice of it all, it hadn't happened yet. My record was clean. My future was still intact. I picked up my phone and dialed the number boldly printed at the top of the invoice. Moretti and Sons, Tony speaking, a gruff, rushed voice answered, accompanied by the chaotic clattering of pots and shouting in the background. "Hi, Tony. This is Jessica from Westbridge High. I'm calling to cancel our catering order for the 14th. There was a pause, followed by an annoyed sigh. Cancel? Kid, it's 2 days out. The chickens are already ordered. You ain't getting your $300 deposit back. Read the contract. I know, I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of the panic that usually governed my high school life. Keep the deposit. We absolutely will not be needing your services. Just cancel the whole thing. Suit yourself, Tony grunted, and the line went dead. Just like that, the biological weapon was disarmed. I dropped the phone onto my bed and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for a lifetime. But as I sat there staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror, a dark, heavy realization crept into my mind. If I just canceled the food and quietly booked a safe alternative sandwiches or pizzas out of my own pocket, Brittany would still take all the credit for the incredible fireworks display. Mr. Harrison would still be a lazy, negligent advisor who enabled her. Samantha would still be the two-faced snake, smiling at me while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They would never know what I saved them from. They would never experience the consequences of their arrogance. They would just continue stepping on me, pushing me down to elevate themselves. Why should I protect people who, in another timeline, gleefully watched me drown? Why should I shield them from a disaster they engineered? I shouldn't. I stood up, moving with a cold, robotic precision. I grabbed the manila budget folder containing the vendor quotes, slipped it into my backpack, and zipped it shut. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to play the desperate, crying hero begging to be believed. I was going to hand the reins directly to the devil herself and watch her drive the carriage right off the cliff. The hallways of Westbridge High smelled like a sickening mix of cheap body spray and industrial floor wax, exactly as I remembered. Walking into the student council room felt like stepping onto a theatrical stage where I already knew everyone's blocking in lines. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Mr. Harrison was leaning back against his desk, mindlessly scrolling through his phone, completely checked out of his supervisory duties. Brittany held court in the center of the room, flanked by her loyal lapdog, Tyler, and my best friend, Samantha. "We need to make sure the DJ sets up near the lake," Brittany was saying, expertly twirling a lock of blonde hair around her finger. "The acoustic bounce off the water is amazing, and the aesthetic is literally everything for the Instagram photos." I walked over and tossed the heavy manila budget folder right onto the center table. It landed with a loud, aggressive smack, startling the group into silence. "I'm out," I said, keeping my posture rigid and my tone perfectly neutral. Brittany blinked, her perfectly manicured eyebrows shooting up toward her hairline. "Excuse me?" "I'm stepping down from the food committee," I announced, looking directly at Mr. Harrison, forcing him to make eye contact with me. "I have way too much going on with AP exams and college prep. I haven't finalized any bookings for the banquet dinner yet. You'll have to handle it yourselves." Mr. Harrison finally put his phone down, his face twisting in profound annoyance. "Jessica, the trip is in 2 days. You can't just drop this in our laps at the 11th hour. That's highly irresponsible." "I just did," I replied, suppressing the urge to scream at him. "The remaining budget is in that folder. All the vendor contacts are in there. I'm sure Brittany can handle it. After all, she's the one who wanted to reorganize the funds for the fireworks. She's the visionary here." Brittany's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but I could practically see the gears turning behind her carefully contoured face. She was a control freak at heart, and she deeply resented that I had any authority over a major aspect of the event. She viewed the banquet as her party. "Fine," Brittany scoffed, crossing her arms. "If you're too incompetent to handle making a few phone calls to restaurants, I'll do it. It's not exactly rocket science. Actually, this is perfect. I can probably find something cheaper than the ridiculous places you were looking at and use the extra cash to rent a VIP photo booth." I hid my smirk behind a mask of exhaustion. "Have at it. It's all yours." As I turned to leave the room, Samantha grabbed my forearm. Her grip was tight, her expression a masterclass in fake concern, masking intense judgment. "Jess, what are you doing?" She hissed under her breath. "You're making us look terrible. Brittany's going to be so mad at you, and you're going to get us frozen out of the cabin assignments." I looked down at Sam's hand resting on my arm. My mind flashed to the courtroom, Sam sitting in the witness box, swearing on a Bible that she saw me stealing from the school. "I'm looking out for myself, Sam," I whispered, my voice dripping with an icy finality she didn't understand. "You should definitely do the same." I pulled my arm away from her grasp and walked out the door without looking back. Over the next 48 hours, I played the part of the detached, stressed-out senior flawlessly. I kept my head down in class, but I kept my ears wide open. By lunchtime the next day, the school rumor mill confirmed exactly what I had anticipated. Brittany had found the loose quotes I had intentionally left right at the front of the manila folder. She saw the rock-bottom, suspiciously cheap price for Moretti & Sons Catering. I sat a few tables away in the cafeteria, discreetly listening as she bragged to Tyler and Sam. "I literally saved us $500 in 10 minutes, Brittany gloated, stabbing a fork into her salad. Jessica was going to book some overpriced, organic, artisanal sandwich place that would have eaten the whole budget. I called this local Italian guy, Tony. He even gave me a massive discount because I told him we didn't need the expensive chafing dishes and sternos to keep the food piping hot. We're eating outside anyway. Who cares if it's a little room temperature? We got the photo booth." My blood ran cold for a fraction of a second, followed immediately by a rush of pure, vindictive adrenaline that made my fingertips tingle. She actively told the caterer not to provide proper heating equipment for bulk poultry and dairy. She didn't just walk into the trap. She dug the grave 10 feet deeper than it had been in my past life. In the previous timeline, the sternos had just run out early. This time, there wouldn't be any heat source at all. Thursday morning arrived with bright blue skies. The charter buses idled outside the school gym, ready to take 80 excited seniors to Silver Pines Resort. The energy in the air was electric. Everyone was talking about the lake, the midnight bonfires, and the massive Italian feast Brittany had promised them for dinner. I sat alone near the very back of bus, number 2. Inside my duffel bag, securely hidden beneath my heavy sweaters, was my personal lifeline. A box of military-grade protein bars, 3 packs of sealed beef jerky, and an arsenal of electrolyte water bottles. Samantha sat a few rows ahead of me, giggling loudly with Brittany. Every so often, Sam would glance back at me over the seat with a look of smug, condescending pity. She clearly thought I was sulking in the back because I had been dramatically iced out of the cool planning clique. I just offered her a tight, close-lipped smile in return. The drive up the winding mountain roads took 3 hours. When we finally arrived at the resort, it was a picturesque, idyllic scene. Towering pine trees framed a crystal-clear lake. Rustic log cabins dotted the hillside, and a massive wooden main lodge sat in the center where the banquet would be held. The air was crisp and clean. It was incredibly hard to reconcile this beautiful, peaceful place with the literal biological war zone it was about to become. At 6 p.m. sharp, the announcements crackled over the resort's outdoor loudspeakers. Mr. Harrison's voice echoed across the grounds, cheerful and entirely oblivious. "Seniors, please make your way to the main lodge pavilion. Dinner is served." I zipped up my jacket against the evening chill and started walking slowly toward the pavilion. From a distance, I could see 2 white catering vans with the faded words Moretti & Sons painted on the side pulling out of the service driveway and speeding away down the mountain. I stepped inside the pavilion, and the smell hit me like a physical wall. The heavy, greasy scent of industrial tomato sauce, sweating mozzarella cheese, and something just slightly sour. There were massive, deep aluminum trays lined up end to end on the folding tables. Just as Brittany had negotiated, there were no metal racks, no water baths, and no blue flames underneath them. The food had been sitting in those thin metal trays since Tony pulled it out of his ovens hours ago. Brittany stood proudly at the head of the buffet line, holding a plastic serving spoon like a royal scepter, beaming for the cameras as the student photographer snapped photos. "Eat up, everyone," Brittany cheered. "Real Italian catering, courtesy of yours truly. Don't say I never did anything for you guys." I hung back in the shadows near the emergency exit doors, crossing my arms over my chest. I watched Tyler load his flimsy paper plate with 3 massive, thick pieces of breaded chicken. I watched Mr. Harrison, the adult who was supposed to safeguard us, heap a mountain of lukewarm baked ziti onto his tray. And I watched Samantha, my traitorous, lying best friend, take a large, eager bite of the cooling poultry, chewing with a smile on her face. Tick, tock. Sunset bled into a dark, starless night, and the much-anticipated grand finale began. Brittany had her prized fireworks display. Explosions of red, gold, and green showered the lake, reflecting off the water while the hired DJ blasted bass-heavy pop anthems across the lawn. Students danced, cheered, and crowded into the overpriced VIP photo booth with ridiculous oversized sunglasses and feather boas. Sitting on the wooden porch of Cabin 4, safely removed from the festivities, I quietly opened a sealed packet of beef jerky. I took a slow bite, letting the salty, preserved flavor ground me. Below me, the party was reaching its peak. But I wasn't watching the fireworks. I was watching the crowd. It started exactly 2 hours and 45 minutes after the buffet lines closed. Tyler was the first casualty. He had been attempting a complicated breakdance move near the DJ speaker when he suddenly froze, his face draining of all color. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his eyes wide, with a sudden, primal panic. He didn't even make it to the main lodge bathrooms. He sprinted toward the ornamental bushes lining the pavilion and violently emptied his stomach into the manicured hydrangeas. A few people laughed, assuming he had somehow smuggled in alcohol, but the laughter died almost instantly. 10 feet away, Harper, the head cheerleader, doubled over with a sharp gasp, clutching her abdomen as if she had been stabbed. She collapsed onto a folding chair, groaning loudly. Then the dominoes began to fall. It was like watching a horrific, synchronized plague wash over a medieval village. Within 20 minutes, the music was drowned out by the agonizing sounds of severe gastrointestinal distress. The luxury VIP photo booth, Brittany's crown jewel, was swiftly commandeered by 3 groaning boys who couldn't make it to the restrooms, turning the expensive velvet interior into a biohazard zone. Chaos erupted. The 4 public restrooms in the main lodge were instantly overrun. Fights literally broke out over bathroom stalls. Kids were crawling in the grass, sobbing in pain, their bodies rejecting the toxic cocktail of bacteria that had incubated in the lukewarm, unregulated chicken and dairy. I remained on my porch, unscrewing the cap of my bottled water. I watched Mr. Harrison stumble out of the lodge, his face a terrifying shade of gray. He leaned heavily against a wooden support beam, sweating profusely, before his knees buckled. The adult in charge, the man who had authorized this catastrophic budget cut, was completely incapacitated, retching into a decorative fire pit. Then I saw Samantha. She was dragging herself up the dirt path toward the cabins, tears streaming down her face, her expensive makeup ruined. She looked absolutely wretched, her hands clutching her stomach as she hobbled like a wounded animal. "Jessica!" she whimpered as she saw me sitting calmly in the shadows. "Jessica, help me! I think I'm dying. My stomach." She reached a trembling hand out toward the steps of my cabin. I didn't move. I didn't offer her a comforting word or rush to get her a damp towel. I just looked down at the girl who, in another life, had gladly committed perjury to destroy my entire future. "The bathrooms in the lodge are full, Sam," I said evenly, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You should probably try cabin 8. I hear they have 2 toilets." "I can't walk that far," she wailed, clutching her abdomen as another wave of cramps hit her. "Please, let me use yours." "No," I replied simply. "I'm keeping my space sanitary. You need to keep moving." A look of pure betrayal flashed across her pale face, but her body gave her no time to argue. Another violent cramp seized her, and she stumbled away into the dark. sobbing hysterically. I watched her go, feeling absolutely nothing but a cold, heavy sense of justice. By 1 a.m., the serene Silver Pines Resort had been transformed into an active triage center. The resort manager, a frantic woman named Brenda, had called 911 when the sheer volume of sick teenagers overwhelmed her staff. Soon, the rhythmic, piercing wail of ambulance sirens shattered the quiet mountain air. Red and blue emergency lights washed over the log cabins. Paramedics rushed across the lawn with stretchers and IV bags. They set up a temporary medical station on the basketball courts, trying to stabilize the worst cases of dehydration before loading them into ambulances bound for the nearest county hospital. I watched as Brittany, the architect of this disaster, was wheeled past my cabin on a stretcher. She was clutching an emesis bag to her chest, her blonde extensions matted with sweat, crying uncontrollably as a paramedic inserted an IV needle into her arm. I took another sip of my clean water, zipped up my jacket, and finally went inside my cabin to go to sleep. Morning broke with a harsh, unforgiving light. The resort was eerily silent, devoid of the usual teenage chatter. Out of 80 students, 68 had required medical attention. 12 were still at the local hospital. The county health department had arrived at dawn, their vans parked aggressively next to the remaining school buses. Men and women in official windbreakers were swabbing the empty aluminum trays and taking notes. At 9 a.m., Principal Higgins arrived in his personal SUV, looking absolutely furious. He had been forced to drive 3 hours up the mountain to deal with a mass casualty event. I was summoned to the resort manager's office shortly after. When I walked in, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Principal Higgins sat behind the desk, his hands clasped tightly. Mr. Harrison sat in the corner, looking deflated, clutching a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. Brittany, who had been released from the ER with heavy anti-nausea medication, sat in a leather chair, looking pale but remarkably defiant. Jessica, Principal Higgins barked, not bothering with pleasantries. Sit down. We have a catastrophic situation on our hands. The health department has confirmed severe salmonella and E. coli poisoning. They are tracing it back to the catering company. I heard, I said calmly, taking the empty seat next to Brittany. Mr. Harrison and Brittany have informed me, Higgins continued, his eyes narrowing, that you were the head of the food committee. They claim you were strictly instructed to book a reputable, high-end caterer, but that you went behind their backs to hire this deeply negligent company to save money. Is that true? My heart beat a steady, triumphant rhythm. Here it was, the exact same script, the exact same attempt to bury me alive to save their own skins. Brittany looked over at me, her eyes flashing with a desperate, malicious warning. She expected me to panic. She expected me to cry and stutter, just like I had before. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and unlocked it. That's a fascinating narrative, Principal Higgins, I said, my voice crisp and confident. But it's completely fabricated. I resigned from the food committee on Tuesday afternoon, directly in front of Mr. Harrison, Brittany, and 2 other witnesses. I specifically cited my discomfort with the budget cuts. Mr. Harrison sat up straight, his face flushing red. Now wait a minute, Jessica. You can't just abandon your post and claim zero responsibility. I didn't just abandon my post, I interrupted, raising a hand. I opened my email app and slid the phone across the desk toward the principal. I formally resigned in writing. If you check your own inbox, Principal Higgins, you will see an email I sent you on Tuesday at 3:15 p.m., officially stepping down from all financial and logistical duties regarding the banquet due to unreconcilable differences regarding food safety standards. I CC'd Mr. Harrison on that email. Principal Higgins frowned, pulling his reading glasses down from his forehead. He tapped his own phone on the desk, opening his email. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room as he scrolled. I saw his jaw tighten. I must have missed this in my daily briefs. Higgins muttered, his face darkening as he read my meticulously worded warning. He turned his furious gaze toward Mr. Harrison. Did you receive this? I might have, Mr. Harrison stammered, shrinking into his chair. But she left the folder with the vendor quotes. She set the trap. I left the research I had done, which included multiple options. I corrected him sharply. What Brittany chose to do with that information was her own prerogative. I turned my attention to the pale, trembling class president. In fact, I'm sure the health department investigator outside would love to see the communication between the school and the caterer. Tony at Moretti & Sons is a businessman. I highly doubt he'd take a verbal order without a confirmation text or email from the person finalizing the payment. Brittany let out a choked gasp, all the color draining from her face for a second time that weekend. "Brittany," Principal Higgins demanded, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register, "did you book this vendor?" I was just trying to save the fireworks," she cried out, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes. "Jessica left us in a bind. The quotes were right there, and Tony gave me a discount. I didn't know the food was bad." "Did you or did you not tell the caterer to withhold the heating sternos to save money?" I asked, twisting the knife. "Because I heard you bragging about that specific discount in the cafeteria on Wednesday." Brittany sobbed, burying her face in her hands. She had no defense. There was no forged invoice to pin on me. There was no Samantha to lie for her, because Samantha was currently hooked up to an IV in a hospital bed 10 miles away. I had built an impenetrable wall of evidence, and they had driven straight into it at 100 miles an hour. "I have heard enough," Principal Higgins said, standing up. He looked at Mr. Harrison with utter disgust. "David, you are suspended from your teaching duties pending a full district investigation into gross negligence. Brittany, your parents will be arriving shortly. I suggest you prepare yourself, as you will be removed from your position as class president immediately, and your graduation status is now under severe review." He turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction. "Jessica, you are dismissed. Thank you for your thorough record keeping." "You're welcome, sir," I replied. I stood up, retrieved my phone from the desk, and walked toward the door. As my hand gripped the brass handle, I paused and looked back at Brittany. She was weeping, her face buried in her hands, her empire of popularity and privilege crumbling into dust around her. Mr. Harrison stared blankly at the floor, his career effectively over. They were exactly where I had been in my past life. But this time, the punishment actually fit the crime. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the crisp, morning mountain air. The sun was shining brightly, reflecting off the calm surface of the lake. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet scent of pine needles and absolute, undeniable victory. My college acceptances were safe. My future was mine again. And as I walked away from the wreckage, I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. Thank you so much for listening to this crazy story of karma and survival. If you enjoyed watching this elite group of bullies get exactly what they deserved, please smash that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good revenge story, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable real-life drama. Let me know in the comments what you would have done.